We are taught that the apex of psychological maturity in an adult partnership is the capacity for unconditional love and absolute forgiveness. Modern clinical consensus frames the absorption of an offense without retaliation as the ultimate relational virtue. The psychotherapist Bert Hellinger observed a mechanical failure in this approach. Through his work with systemic family therapy, he identified that adopting the posture of a moral martyr actually dismantles the structural foundation of a relationship. When one partner absorbs a blow and simply forgives it, they engage in a unilateral maneuver. By canceling the debt without requiring compensation, the forgiving partner elevates themselves to a morally superior position. This vertical elevation permanently severs the horizontal, peer-to-peer connection that previously tied the two individuals together. Equality is broken, and the system collapses into a hierarchy. Healthy adult relationships operate on a rigorous, almost mathematical balance of debt. What our culture traditionally views as selfless virtue acts as a systemic poison. To understand why this balance is strictly enforced, we have to discard the Freudian view of the superego. Conscience is not a collection of internalized authority figures dictating objective moral truths. Hellinger defines this instead as a bonding conscience. It is a primal, systemic organ of perception, designed purely to ensure group survival. Within this model, the sensation of guilt does not trigger because an immoral act is committed. The alarm sounds only when an individual drifts dangerously close to the outer boundary of the group, risking expulsion. Conversely, a clear conscience, or innocence, is merely the somatic sensation of secure placement deep within the group. It is the physical relief of knowing your membership is safe. Guilt and innocence are biological proximity alarms. They tether humans to the safety of their primary systems, independent of religious or ethical judgments. This survival mechanism dictates how different relationships are structured. A mother gives to her child with unconditional, absolute abnegation, but an adult partnership requires a strictly conditional, transactional architecture. This chart visualizes Hellinger's homeostatic axiom. A viable adult relationship survives on a precise, continuous exchange of giving and receiving. If one partner floods the system with resources, pouring at a volume the other cannot physically contain, the feedback loop fractures. The systemic rule is absolute. Adults only give what their partner has the capacity to return. Overgiving strips the receiver of their agency, forcing them into an oppressive state of unpayable debt, where their only systemic recourse is to eventually abandon the relationship to escape the insolvency. In adult systems, excessive generosity triggers systemic oppression and relationship failure. This strict requirement for balance introduces a severe engineering problem when physical parity is impossible. Consider an individual marrying a severely disabled partner. Without an alternative mechanism for repayment, the able-bodied partner becomes trapped as the overgiver. This systemic disparity inevitably collapses the relationship under the weight of the disabled partner's unpayable obligation. Hellinger observed a structural solution for edge cases: meta-level compensation. Repayment moves to a higher cognitive tier. The receiver must explicitly acknowledge the disparity, stating, "I know you give me more than I can return, and I accept this as a special gift." When material parity is impossible, systemic equilibrium demands rigorous, conscious acknowledgement. This intellectual counterweight prevents the system from tearing itself apart. This exact cybernetic lens applies to the negative side of the ledger. Moments of interpersonal harm require the same mechanical compensation as acts of generosity. He who considers himself too good to be angry destroys the relationship. Unilateral forgiveness functions as a stealth power grab within a closed system. By canceling the debt of an offense without allowing the aggressor to compensate for it, the forgiver forces their partner into a permanent state of insolvency. The forgiver assumes a patronizing, parent-like role, while the forgiven is pushed down into an infantilized position, stripped of their honor and agency. Deprived of the ability to restore their own standing, the forgiven party begins to build deep, systemic resentment toward the partner who pardoned them. Absolute forgiveness is inherently alienating. It irreversibly converts equal partners into hierarchical adversaries. To restore horizontal parity after a boundary has been breached, the system requires a highly specific, measured mechanical action: loving retaliation. The formula for healthy retaliation requires the offended party to return the harm at a slightly reduced magnitude. This exchange reestablishes horizontal alignment. The fractional difference of +1 represents mercy, leaving a slight positive balance that incentivizes the system to keep interacting. Disproportionate ideological revenge ignores this formula. Demanding absolute justice or inflicting a return harm of -15 creates endless, escalating negative feedback loops. Calculated, mitigated anger is a generative force. It is the necessary mechanical input required to reboot and save a damaged peer-to-peer system. These systemic mechanics operate under strict architectural constraints. Hellinger estimates this logic functions optimally in a limited network of approximately 20 individuals. The biological urge for equilibrium, compensation, and tribal conscience evolved exclusively to manage the physics of small, primary survival groups. You feel the heavy weight of debt when a friend pays for your dinner, but people routinely manipulate their taxes without a second thought. The systemic conscience cannot process anonymous relationships. Applying this micro-logic to macro-social contexts is dangerous. Attempting to take on the world's pain or trying to scale the fierce loyalty of a family unit to the level of a nation-state bypasses the system's limits and leads directly to ideological destruction. Systemic conscience is strictly localized. Universalizing family homeostasis creates macro-level chaos. Adult love is not a static state of sacrificial emptying, nor is it a sanctuary of pure angelic forgiveness. Enduring partnerships function as a rigorous, conditioned dance of continuous mutual debt. Retaining the capacity to exact measured retribution is just as vital to the survival of the system as the capacity to give generously. This requires strict intellectual and systemic humility. It is the conscious refusal to project yourself morally above the harm you have suffered, and the refusal to offer more than your partner can carry. True systemic health survives through the courageous, objective, and ongoing management of relational equilibrium.